Hey and welcome back to Fanfic Reading. Today we are reading Fated Meetings, Green Glass by Raalm, and ToxicExotic. I hope you enjoy.
Fated Meetings, Green Glass. Emerald Sustrai. The taste of warm chocolate hits the back of my throat as I take a sip of my drink and put it back down with a small satisfied breath. Knowing what awaits me, I breathe in deeply and enjoy the cooling effect that the mint leaves behind, as I've always done. I know it probably isn't the best to drink hot chocolate on a hot summer's day, but I don't really care. Mint hot chocolate has been my favorite since I was a child, possibly my only favorite thing when I was a child, so no matter the weather, it's always my drink of choice. I look up from my work as I stretch the ache from my body and take in another deep, chilling breath. I have no idea how long I've been in the cafe. 3 hours? 4? Could even be 5 for all I know, but it's not like I really care. Anything beats going home. Though, if I'm honest with myself, I do quite like the place. It was a nice little find of mine just before my college went on break. It's not particularly big, nor is it overly fancy, but it's quiet. There are rarely any cars going by outside, and the staff usually don't bother me so long as I order a drink every hour, and with how good they are, and the fact they're pretty cheap, even without my student discount, I'm more than happy to keep doing that. All in all, it's a perfectly fine place where I can focus on getting my summer coursework out of the way in peace. Not to say it's perfect, of course. I've never really believed that whole spiel about the perfect place. Even as good as this small tucked-away cafe in a small corner of the city is, some of the staff are kinda dicks, especially the boy who is currently on shift. Mercury Black. I just had to pick the one cafe in all of Argus where that two-bag worked, didn't I? Not like I can't handle him though. All bark, no bite. Despite his constant attempts to hit on me at college, I'd be willing to bet never drinking a mint hot chocolate again that if some girl was ever stupid enough to go home with him, it would be the most unsatisfying night of her life. I hear the bell above the door chime, but don't turn around since I know Mercury's stupid face will be what greets me. So instead, I glance into the window. It's still daytime, so the reflection is hard to make out, but a head of pink and brown hair is moving towards the counter. I immediately feel for the girl as she looks no older than 14, and a conversation with that kid at such a young age would surely be detrimental to her health. But so long as she's quick and doesn't antagonize him, she should be fine, so I return to my work. It's almost 3 minutes later that a loud sigh cuts through the room, a rapid tapping quickly following it. The sound aggravates my ears, and I try to block it out, but the sound of Mercury's drawling voice catches my attention. "Would you just say what you want already, kid? I have stuff to do." Kid? Is the girl still there? And what on remnant is that tapping? Curiosity finally gets the better of me, and I twist in my chair to see the girl who had walked in tapping her pen against the counter with an annoyed look on her face. In her other hand is a notepad that seems half scribbled in. Usually I'm not the helping type, why would I be? But something about her situation speaks to me. Most likely the fact that she's having to put up with a silver-haired idiot, a situation that is annoyingly familiar to me. So I lift from my chair with a groan and slowly make my way over. "Stop being a dick, Mercury," I say upon reaching the counter and leaning against it. "Me? Kid's been standing there for 3 minutes pointing. How the fuck am I supposed to know which of the 50 cakes she wants?" The kid's eyebrows fall into a scowl, and my attention is drawn to what is quite an odd sight. Both of her pupils are different colors, one bright pink and the other a dark brown. Just like her hair. There's no way for me to know if they are real or just contacts, but the effect is certainly striking. "You know she can hear you, right? Please, bitch is doing more hand signals than a traffic warden. Probably deaf or some shit." At the boy's words, the girl makes a motion that an adult would say a girl her age shouldn't do, and Mercury's brow raises in surprise. Before he can even reply, she turns and points to the pen in my hand, and I quickly hold it out to her. In seconds, the girl has scrawled words on her notepad and thrusts it towards Mercury. From my inclined position, I'm easily able to read them too. I'm not deaf, asshole. "Great. Now tell me what you want so I can go back to reading my magazine." His hand motions to an abandoned football magazine that is currently residing on his stool. "You can read?" I ask sarcastically while the girl writes out her order. "Fuck you." I shrug and Mercury snatches the notepad from the kid's hand to look at her order. With little more than a grumble to himself, he throws it back down and moves to retrieve the items. Once his back is turned, the girl once again sticks her middle finger up at him, and I let out a small chuckle at her attitude. It reminds me of myself from when I was younger. From the dyed hair to the revealing outfit, both a living embodiment of disrespect and disobedience. Though now a few years older, I can't help but wonder if I ever wore anything that revealing when I was younger. A white top covers her chest, with the buttons running up the front and 2 flaps hanging over each breast to expose the pink inner fabric. Plenty of cleavage is also exposed, as is her stomach, but I look away from those areas. White skinny jeans also cover her legs, ending just high enough to expose her ankles, though a strip of brown connects them to a pair of white high heels that change to black around the toes and heel. If she wasn't so young, I would easily call the outfit sexy. But I also can't believe her parents let her leave the house wearing it. My own mother never really cared what I wore, or about anything else I did really, but even she would have raised an eyebrow at such an outfit. "Don't mind him," I say, as the girl pulls out a wallet from her back pocket and tosses a lean card onto the counter. "Dude's an asshole to pretty much everyone. He'll get what he deserves one day." More words are scribbled onto the notepad, and she pushes it over to me. A small hint of curiosity burns within me as to why she doesn't talk, but I push it away and look at her reply. My brother would kick his ass if he was here. "Now that I would pay money to see." I chuckle honestly. "You can join me at my table if you want. He shouldn't bother you if you're with me. Not if he wants to keep his nuts anyway." Pink and brown eyes look up at me with their own curiosity, and I feel like I'm being inspected. However, the moment passes and the girl gives a small shrug just as Mercury returns to drop a plate with a chocolate and strawberry cake on the counter. She throws him a sneer and picks it up, quickly moving to the table that I pointed out. "You're such a prick, you know that?" I say, and turn back to him. "One I bet you'd love to sit on." He grinned. I resist the urge to slap him, and smirk at him instead. "From the stories I've heard, I doubt I'd feel anything if I did." Leaving him to stew on the possibilities of those rumors being real, which they were, I make my way back to my table where the girl is already happily digging into her cake. Her eyes are glancing idly over the work that litters the surface. "You would think they'd hire someone better with kids in a dessert cafe," I say as I sit down. "Right." The rolling of the girl's eyes surprises me a little, as does the clatter of her fork hitting the plate. Her hand disappears behind her for a second, but returns with her wallet, and she quickly unfolds the white leather and places it in front of me to reveal her ID. 2 lines stand out the most. Neapolitan. 31/09/1998. "Oh," I say, surprised that the girl, who is likely to be less than 5 feet tall, is actually the same age as me. "Sorry." Looking at her ID, something else stands out too. The eyes in the picture are exactly the same as the ones in front of me. Obviously not contacts then. I pass the wallet back and reach down for my drink, the brown liquid inside still warm enough to heat the glass. The pleasant cooling effect returns again as I take a sip and place it back down, pulling another pen from my bag. However, before I can get back to my work, the notepad is slid in front of me. "It's fine. I'm used to it. Thanks for the help though." I'm always down to get under his skin." I smile and pass the notepad back. "I'm Emerald, by the way." Neo smiles back and scribbles on the notepad. "Cute name." "Thanks." Neo's smile widens as she returns to her cake and I return to my work, but I find my eyes lingering on her for a moment to take in what I missed before. Though she certainly does look young, the bone structure of her face suggests she is a little older than I first thought. Her lips appear to be a little fuller too, and as my eyes fall down to my work, I notice the well-developed areas I hadn't looked at before. But I quickly pull my eyes away and return to my work. 10 minutes pass in almost silence, Neo eating her cake while I study, but I actually quite enjoy it. There was always a weird feeling when people were around, like they needed to talk, or hum, or do something to break the blissful silence, but Neo doesn't seem to have that issue. While I work, I take a few chances to steal a glance at her to find that she's simply doodling on her notepad, though I can't see what it is she's drawing. Another half an hour passes with me focusing on my notes for the coursework and Neo on her notepad, but I feel a tap on my arm and look up at her. I see a smile on her face before she redirects my attention down to the pad on the table to be met with my own face, or at least as much as could be portrayed of it with the single color and so little time. It's actually a pretty good rendition if I say so myself, the shading on it enough to convey that it's a portrait versus a frivolous drawing. Damn! I breathe as I inspect the look of concentration on my face. There would have been none of that 3 years ago. Really made me look beautiful. Neo shrugs with a smirk and flips to a new page to scribble something. Wasn't hard to do that. I'm a little stunned as I read it, but I hardly have time to say anything as the girl writes out something else. But I have to go. Aw, gotcha. Maybe I'll see you around. As the girl stands up, a weird feeling comes over me. A feeling I've never really felt before, like I was supposed to be the one saying more. I'm not sure why, but the idea that it's too late makes me a little annoyed at myself. While the girl stands up and slips her wallet back into her pocket, I let myself look at her fully and find that she is actually extremely attractive. Not that I hadn't already noticed that, but it just became even more obvious. The soft features. The way she seems to know how to make the most of her smaller stature. The white clothes that blend perfectly with her creamy skin. They all just worked on her, and are, as I had thought earlier, quite sexy. But unfortunately, before I can even say anything else, Neo gives me a wave goodbye and walks away, leaving me with a deep regret as the door shuts behind her for getting tongue-tied at the most inopportune time. I slump in my chair, taking the first disappointed sip of my drink. However, it's as my eyes return to my work that I spot it. The small piece of paper left on the table with my face drawn onto it. Picking it up, I gaze at it for a second to admire the work that had gone into it, before carefully folding it. Just as I do, I catch a bunch of crossed-out sentences on the other side. Unintelligible past thoughts or words the girl had been unable to speak, but there was one that was left intact. Cute name. With a smile at the realization that the girl seems to have actually been flirting with me, or had at least been thinking about trying, I pocket the piece of paper with the hope that we will meet again sometime, and return to my coursework. Neapolitan. Stupid asshole, I think while sitting down at the paper-laden table. Books and folders are littered all over the surface, each one covered in scribbles and crossed-out notes, except for one sheet that sits right in front of the opposite chair. The writing on that one was neat and tidy, the cursive perfect, like the girl is trying to make sure her effort shines through. As I dip my fork into the cake and take a bite, the delicious taste of strawberry filling my mouth, I look through the work and spot enough standout words to deduce that my savior is studying psychology. Hopefully, she doesn't try to analyze me, I hope, as the girl approaches. It really would be a shame since she's actually rather beautiful. I'm easily able to tell that green is her favorite color by just how much of it is on her. Even her hair is green, and cut level with her chin, a common style I've seen around Argus, except for 2 long locks that fall to the small of her back. The dark skin is smooth like milk chocolate, and she very clearly takes care of herself if the taut stomach that her green crop top leaves exposed is anything to go by. Green jean shorts cover her hips and the top of her long legs, but brown chaps overlap them and fall to just below her knee. I can't help but think that's a shame. You would think they'd hire someone better with kids in a dessert cafe, the girl says as she sits down. Right. It's not the first time it's happened, and though I hadn't bothered to correct the silver-haired guy, I can't have a beautiful girl like this thinking I'm young as hell. So with a roll of my eyes and a drop of my fork, I reach back and grab my wallet to place it on the table with my ID showing. The raising of her eyebrows does amuse me though, since, while it's frustrating to be mistaken as a kid all the time, I do quite like my youthful looks as they help keep most people, those I generally can't be bothered with, away. It's also a handy excuse to dodge the people in towns who try to get passers-by to sign up for stuff. Oh, sorry. I write out a quick reply on my notepad as the girl hands me back the wallet and takes a sip of her drink, and before she can return to her work, slip it under her eyes. She smiles as she reads it, the simple gesture making her ruby red eyes twinkle. I'm always down to get under his skin. I'm Emerald, by the way. Of course that's her name. I muse and accept the pad back to quickly write a harmless, flirty message in return. Unfortunately, she only gives a basic thanks in return and returns to her work. However, as I return to my cake, I notice her eyes lingering on me, the red roaming over my body with interest. I feel a smug smile pull at my face and lean back in the chair to enjoy the cake, and to give her a better look, of course. But when Emerald's eyes finish their wondering, nothing is said, and the girl returns to her work, probably not even noticing my smirk fading to a frown. As the next few minutes pass, I write out a few chat-up lines, but they all feel a little too direct for a first meeting. Plus, with each passing minute, the look of concentration on the beautiful girl's face deepens, and I start to feel like I shouldn't interrupt. So crossing out most of the ones I've written, I spin the pen in my hand and begin to draw her. I've never exactly been the best at drawing, but the doodles are always certainly passable. It's also a great excuse to be looking at her, something I'm more than willing to have an excuse for. She reminds me of a walking, talking version of my cake. Her skin the delectable-looking chocolate frosting, its surface so smooth that I doubt my fingers would meet a single bump should I run them along it. Her eye reeds being the strawberries on top, the vibrant red standing out strikingly and drawing the eye. I feel a little sad that I can't quite capture the array of colors, but I make do and try my best to capture her likeness. There is a little something missing though, but I can't quite put my finger on it. 30 minutes pass before I know it, the clock on the wall showing that it's almost time for me to catch the bus home. Knowing that I couldn't miss it, since the bad thing about moving to a new city meant I had no idea when the next would be, a quiet sigh escapes me as I tap the girl on the arm. Her red eyes glance curiously up at me, but are quick to fall to the paper I motion to. It's a couple of seconds before she speaks, but when she does, it's with a smile. "Damn. Really made me look beautiful," she says. Not exactly hard to do, I think in return, and quickly realize that is a good pickup line. I write it down on a new page and show it to her. Unfortunately, as she reads it, I spot the clock tick over to a new minute, and remember that there are only 2 minutes left for me to get to my bus stop. Regrettably, I quickly write another note on the pad telling her I have to go. "Aw, gotcha. Maybe I'll see you around," Emerald says as I stand up and put my stuff back into my jeans. I hope so. That thought runs through my head as I put my stuff back into my jeans. It's hard not to notice her eyes checking me out again, and as I allow her to, I pull the drawing free of my notepad and leave it on the table in the hopes she will see it and turn it over. However, knowing I can't waste any more time, I give her a small wave and hurry over to the door, a little bummed that I didn't at least get her number. Half an hour with a beautiful girl, and all I have to show for it is a pen. Could be worse. I sigh inwardly and pocket it as I rush to the bus stop. Definitely getting her number next time though. Emerald Sustry. The strong smells of cooked chicken and ham attack my senses as I walk past the delicatessen and allow my eyes to skim over what they have. Not that I can afford any of it. The beautiful aroma that drifts up is almost teasing, making my mouth water and getting me slightly annoyed at the packaged, store-brand, ham slices in my shopping cart. Just as it does every time I pass the back section of the grocery store, the hope that one day I could purchase one enters my head, but it's quickly shaken away. Why waste money when the packaged stuff is fine? So with an inward sigh, I move away from the fresh section and head down a nearby aisle that is filled with dairy products. The bare essentials are added to my cart. Milk, a block of cheese that tastes more like its plastic packaging, butter. Once I drop them inside, I do some quick calculations to make sure I have enough for a delivery. With the frozen food, the fridge stuff, and some bread and tins alongside some other essentials, I find that I'm roughly 3 lean under delivery and let out a happy sigh. It's very rare that the shopping comes in under the 25 lean budget, but when it does, it means I get to treat myself a little. So I leave the dairy aisle behind and make my way to the end of the drinks aisle to pick up a tub of name brand mint hot chocolate powder. Mom will likely throw a bitch fit when she sees it, but it's not like she's ever really around anyway. Dropping it in the cart, I lean back over to make sure of the amount. However, while I'm counting, I feel someone standing behind me. Though it's likely someone checking out items on the other shelf, I still feel myself freeze up a little at the thought that it might be a security guard. Unfortunately, my younger days have left me with quite a reputation around the area, and though they are long since over, many stores still keep a careful watch on my actions. But before I can even look to see whether it is a guard, I feel a slight tug on the bottom of my tank top and let out a sigh. Great. A Hanzio. Upon turning, my thoughts are cut off by the sight that greets me, and my scowl turns into a look of surprise. Before me is the girl from the cafe last week, her pink and brown eyes bright and happy. A confident smile stretches across her lips, and her hand is holding up the same notepad from that day with a single word written down. Hi. Hi. The stumbling of my words isn't normal for me, and I give a subtle cough to correct it. Are you following me? Neo scrawls on her notepad and holds it up again. Maybe? I raise an amused eyebrow, and her smile widens a little. She looks incredible again, though a little more colorful. A brown corset as top covers her top half, the bottom angling towards the middle, leaving her hips for all to see, and disappeared into a pair of brown jean shorts held up by a pink belt. Covering her feet are a pair of brown boots with pink laces. It's a couple of seconds later that I realize my staring is quite obvious, so I return the smile. So should I be worried? The girl chuckles, but no sound comes out. The only way I even recognize it is because her head tilts slightly to the side and her eyes light up a little, but it's actually quite adorable. The chuckle quickly fades though, and she gives a shake of her head and holds up a drink in her hand. Ah, shame. Thought I'd say hey. I feel a smile tug at my lips and cock my hips a little. It's very clear that the girl is flirting now, and that knowledge makes the smile a little wider. I was actually about to check out. A mischievous glee glitters across her eyes, and she places a hand on her hip. Her leg extends a little and her hips angle while she gives me a wink. My cheeks warm as I look at the posing girl, and my earlier bravado falters a little. Neo clearly notices and gives another silent chuckle. I meant my stuff. I say and motion to my car. A small pout forms on the girl's face. She gives a shrug and returns to normal. The girl is much more forward than she was shocked, but a part of me likes it. So as I pulled her car around and prepared to go to the entrance, I gave her another curious look. You doing anything today? Neo shakes her head and points to me with a raised eyebrow. Not really. You want to hang or something? I watch the girl's hand raise, and her finger tap her chin thoughtfully. I don't know why I'm holding my breath as she thinks the offer over, but I am. The girl may be mute, but she clearly knows how to use it to be cute. Thankfully, after a couple of seconds, she gave a thumbs up and a nod of her head, and I let my breath out as she smiles. While we head towards the checkout area, I glance towards the girl. There is a certain grace to her movements, like she's more skipping than walking. Every step she takes gives off the impression that the bottom of her boots are made of springs, and the effect is almost mesmerizing. It reminds me of some of the girls at my college who study dance. They always had the same spring in their step, and their bodies were always toned to perfection, just like Neo's clearly was. Dancing, drawing, cutesy animated movements. All forms of expression that might be to make up for. I cut myself off that line of thought. I've just met the girl. It isn't really my place to be analyzing her. Besides, she might not even be a dancer for all I know. However, at that thought, we reach the checkout area and Neo does a hop-turn step. At least that's what I think it's called from what I've picked up, and my suspicions are pretty much confirmed. While the cashier scans my stuff through, the other girl heads off to the self-checkout and pays for her drink. She returns just as my stuff is finished being sorted. After asking for a delivery early the next morning and paying for the stuff, we both leave the supermarket and find ourselves on the busy street. The place is pretty packed with it being summer holidays, and traffic roars in front of us. So, what are you up for? I ask, and Neo quickly writes on her notepad. I recently moved here. Not sure what there is to do. Oh, okay. I blink at the new information. Well, there is a market nearby. Plenty of clothes there we can look at. Then maybe the arcade. The owner is pretty cool. Neo writes on her pad again and is about to hold it out when she suddenly pulls it back and adds a little more to what she had written. Once she finally finishes, she holds the pad out and I feel my eyes widen. Sounds good to me. Oh, and I can type faster than I can write. Below her words is a number, and as I look at the girl, she gives me a playful smile. It's obviously an excuse, but I don't really care and quickly pull out my scroll to input it and send off a message so that she is mine in return. What's with the notepad if you can type faster? I ask as she pulls her own scroll free from her shorts. The reply certainly does come much faster this time as her fingers zoom nimbly over the keypad. Drains my battery to use my scroll all day. Plus, I can pretend my pen is run out when I don't want to talk to people. Before I can type a reply, a second message comes in. Or when I want to attract a cute girl to help me. I blush deeply as I read the second message and turn to her with a raised eyebrow, a little suspicious of the truth behind that. You faked your pen running out to talk to me? Neo chuckles silently again, the action still adorable, and gives a quick shake of her head. The ping of my scroll was the only thing to pull me away from the smile, and I looked down to check it. Lucky accident. She gives me a wink and, for some reason, it gets rid of some of my nerves, but also sparks a few new ones. Though the doubts of the girl flirting with me are gone, I feel old scars open a little, but I ignore them and glance down at her with a smirk as I lead the way to the market, one hand in my pocket while the other clutches my scroll. It's hot inside the dark arcade. Even with no windows and the air conditioning on, the heat of August summer still permeates every inch of the room, made a little worse by the heat that emanates from the machines. It only took one game, a dance machine Neo had dragged me to immediately, for my own body to be covered in sweat, and for my clothes to cling to my skin. However, an hour later as I watch as her lean against her sword, a tiny bead of sweat dripping from her forehead down her cheek, I can't help but feel the heat is a little worth it. Neo looked radiant on most games we played, albeit she seemed to struggle on the gun games. But when it came to any game involving movement, she was a natural. Her body moved and bounced, twisted and turned with a fluidity that I doubt I could ever match. Her actions were so enthralling that I could barely take my eyes away, and she seemed to have known it. In fact, she seemed to have reveled in it so much that a small laugh escaped her, the sound surprising to me since it was the first I'd heard from her. Towards the end of our session on the dance machine, it almost felt like she was just trying to entice me with how seductive her movements were, and it was a job well done. Our final game, in which Neo was still leaning on, was a little different though. While the fluidity and grace was all still there, but there was also an air of danger. The way Neo moved the plastic sword, the ease in which she'd maneuvered it around, spoke of someone with experience. Maybe she does martial arts too? Or was a cheerleader? She certainly has the confidence and attitude of one, and I remember the ones from Sanctuary High using batons that could give those skills too. You're pretty good with a sword, I chuckle. As the girl shoves the sword back into its holster, she sits down on the slightly raised platform of the game, though she doesn't look too out of breath, and grins up at me. With a knowing look in her eye, she holds up 4 fingers and points to the screen. In the 4th spot on the leaderboard are the initials EMRD, and I chuckle again at the memories. Yeah, I used to come here a lot to escape. Neo's head tilts curiously to the side. Though the memories aren't exactly the nicest, I've never really been scared to talk about them. So I let out a sigh and sit beside her. Parents didn't exactly get along. Spent most of their time fighting until my dad left. Neo's mouth shifts with uncertainty, and her thumb flicks towards herself. It enough for me to get the message that she too had a similar childhood. A small shrug follows. Guess we both learned at a young age that parents suck, huh? I chuckle, earning a smile and a nod as Neo pulls out her scroll. My brother is pretty much all I have. We left Vale the second I turned 18. Sounds like a decent guy. I smile, earning a non-committal shrug from the girl as she holds up 2 fingers and then points to herself. Ah. Neo nods again and wipes her forehead with her arm, leaving the skin glistening. As an excuse to look away, I turn my attention to my token purse and see that it's empty. It's unfortunate they ran out so fast, but I also can't afford any more. So, I hum and show her my empty bag while stretching my legs a little. What you want to do now? Her hand raises to her chin, and she strokes it for a second, but it's barely even that long before her eyes light up, and she types out something eagerly on her scroll. Know any good ice cream parlors? Not really, I reply with a groan and lean back on my hands. Never really been able to afford much in the way of treats. Sorry. I half expect Neo to be a little sad, but instead, she springs to her feet and turns to face me. With how small she is, the position is a little precarious and I turn my head away out of respect, though, if the grin that is being beamed down at me is anything to go by, I'm also sure she did it on purpose. A hand is offered out though, and I happily take it and allow her to pull me to my feet, only be amused by the sudden switching of heights. We can explore together then. Sounds good to me. I smile and toss the bag into the nearby recycling bin. To my surprise, Neo lets out an audible chuckle and quickly types on her scroll and playfully sticks out her tongue. You're all about being green. I roll my eyes as I read the truly terrible pun, but Neo seems amused by that too. However, It's only as the girl begins to walk that I realize that our hands are still connected. I allow it to continue for a little bit, the pressure feeling kinda nice, but we separate them when we exit the arcade. The market is just as bustling as when we were looking through it earlier, but I know for a fact that there is no ice cream store around, and lead us outside. If either of us thought that it would be cooler in the streets of Argus, then we were both wrong. Without the air conditioning of the arcade, the windless roads feel almost scorching as the heat saps all the moisture from the air. Even still, I know I should enjoy it. The heat of Argus will only last until the sun goes down, and then the colder winds from Solitas will arrive and make it as cold as winter. In any other season, it wouldn't be too uncommon to wake up to a random day of snow either. Though we haven't had one of those in weeks, which is good because the cold has always bothered me. There's a food district about 10 minutes away, I say and point towards Snow Branch Bridge. Pretty expensive though. Neo offers a simple shrug in return and makes her way off towards the direction I just pointed. As I catch up, she pulls her drink from her shorts and takes a sip before handing it to me. While it's not mint, the strawberry flavor water feels great against my dry throat, but I don't let myself drink too much and quickly hand it back. So you moved from Vale? I ask, curious to get to know a little more about her since, while there was a bit of conversation in the arcade, it had been mostly about the games. Neo gives a small nod in return. Do you miss it there? The girl thinks for a second, but quickly types out a reply on her scroll and gives a shrug. Some friends, but not really. I give her a soft hum and continue to walk beside her. Friends had never been a thing for me, what with being the school's poor kid, and the only one I had led me down a dark path that I'm glad I didn't stay on. If I had, I'd likely be sharing her cell right now. Do you stay in contact with them at least? Neo gives a nod of her head and holds her scroll out. On the home screen is a picture of 3 girls. A beautiful blonde with a wild mane of hair and a wicked grin. A tall girl wearing all white with pitch black hair and a disinterested look on her face. And the third was Neo herself, far shorter than the others, but wearing a smug grin. They all look like an odd bunch, but the girl points to the black-haired girl with a smile and quickly types something. Melanie always has that look, but she's rather kind. Oh, what about the blonde? Yang. Kind too, but constantly getting into fights. Sound like a fun pair. I smile and earn one in return. There's something sweet about Neo's smiles though, almost like she isn't holding anything back, that each one is genuine. I suppose it's because that's how she really conveys herself, but before I can stop myself, my next question escapes me. So no girlfriend back in Vale? Her smile turns into a smirk and I look away for a second, only to look back and see her shaking her head. I feel a little relieved at the action, though in retrospect, the blatant flirting should have made it obvious that she's single. Just as I'm about to turn away, I see Neo point at me and know the question is being returned. I shake my head too, and the smirk on Neo's face widens a little as she returns to her scroll. Before she can finish whatever she is typing though, a loud grunt greets my ear, and I turn to see she's bumped into a passerby and rebound off of him. She falls to the floor, and I whip my head around to see who she had run into. The man is big, but most of it is muscle. His black hair fades to ashy gray at the tips, and is brushed to one side, but his purple eyes are narrow and annoyed. He lets out a disgusted groan as he pats his white and pink t-shirt, where there is a wet mark on his ribs. Ugh! Really? He asks, his tone tinged with impatience. Can't you look where you're going? If you had taken your own advice, you wouldn't have bumped into her. I fire back quickly. Excuse me? I'm the one with a filthy shirt here. Because you were a dumbass. Because she bumped into me, he growled. As I stare into his angry purple eyes, I see Neo stand up in my peripheral. Very much to my surprise, she steps behind me with a downcast look. I feel shuffling behind me, and confusion enters the man's eyes, as a familiar notepad is pushed into my line of sight. From the slight angling, it's clear to me that she wants him to see the shaky writing too. Did I hurt him, Em? I'm a little surprised too by those words, so I look back to see a scared look on Neo's face as she hides behind me like a child. It's a stark different from earlier, and if I hadn't been spending the day with her, I'd probably believe too. Catching on to her plan, however, I smirk at her. No, it's fine, Neo. I turn back to him and square up a little as I prepare to talk louder. He's just an asshole who like shouting at kids. His face pales as people turn to inspect the scene. WH what? Yeah. She's 13, you dick. No wonder she refuses to speak with assholes like you shouting at her all the time. I didn't. He looks around nervously. I'm sorry. Shove your sorry and just fuck off, will you? I snarl, my hand moving around to rest on Neo's head. With one last look around him, he takes off past us and quickly moves out of sight. I feel giggles begin to well up within me, but they would give us away if released, so I push them down and quickly begin to move with Neo to a new street. The second we're out of sight of everyone who saw, though, I'm unable to keep them in and let out a hearty laugh. To my side, Neo does the same. That was devious. I chuckle a couple of seconds later when I've calmed down. You're a good actor. Neo's chuckles fall silent against, and she gives a small bow before she returns to her scroll. When I check the ping on my own, though, I see 2 messages. I read the newest first, and it reveals that her brother had taught her it, but it's the earlier, incomplete message that was clearly sent when the guy had bumped into her that catches my eye the most. Girls here are stupid. Again I blush. But I also smile. From how little Neo reacted to having read that it was sent while typing the other message, she obviously didn't regret it. Unsure what to say in return, I turned back to the direction we were walking and point to a golden sign up ahead. The food district is just up there. I see the smaller girl's brow furrow a little as I begin walking, and she quickly types out a new message. This one surprises me a little as I read it. You don't take compliments well. Of all the direct things said, that one hits me the hardest. Not just because it's also a rather forward way of saying, I'm flirting with you, but you're not flirting back, but also because it's true. It's been like that for a couple of years, ever since her. Sorry. I sigh. Just like with my parents, the memory is more annoying than something I'm scared to talk about, but I definitely know what it did. My ex was not the kindest person. Compliments were her way of getting me to do what she wanted. Neo's scowl deepens again and her fingers are a blur on the keypad. She sounds like a bitch. Yeah. I breathe. She kinda was. Another ping draws my attention as we finally walk into the food district, and the smell of various foods hits my senses. Well, the only thing I wanted from you was your number. So me saying you're beautiful is a free observation. It's the most direct message yet, and it pulls out the biggest smile yet too. You're very forward, I say with a chuckle. Neo simply giggles and throws me a wink. It's clear she already knows and is completely fine with it, and I am too. Though they make me blush and flustered, I do quite like that she is flirting as she is pretty attractive herself. And wanting to at least let her know that, I give a small cough to get her attention. You are too. I say the word slowly and clearly, making sure she hears me, and thankfully she does. It's not a smile or a wink this time, but a grin and a stuck-out tongue. Her pink eyes twinkles in the sunlight, and she gives a little skip as we walk. The reaction is almost enough to earn a laugh from me, but before I can, Neo grabs my hand and pulls me towards a stand she's pointing to in the distance. Even I can tell that it's an ice cream stand. When we reach it, the man tending it gives us a warm smile, and Neo quickly points to 3 different flavors. I watch him scoop the chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry into a small bowl and feel my mouth water at just how delicious it looks, but I know can't afford it. However, to my surprise, Neo squeezes my hand and points to the wide selection of frozen dessert. Oh, I'm goo. She cuts me off with another squeeze of my hand and pulls me forward. Her eye is set into a firm resistance, and she nods towards the cart with a smile. It's clear she isn't going to take no for an answer. You sure? I ask, earning a firm nod in return. K. Just a mint chocolate scoop is fine. The girl grins happily and holds up 2 fingers to tell the man to give me 2 scoops, and he gladly obliges. Once he's doled the Neo hands over the lean, much more than I could afford, and accepts them with a smile. Handing one to me, I drop her hand to take it from her. Thanks, I say with a smile. Before I can even take a bite, Neo dips her spoon into my pot and steals a little to put it in her mouth. As she does, she gives me a wink and begins to walk towards some benches that overlook Argus' iconic bridge that connects to an island that is used as an Atlas military base. We attempt to sit down, but the metal is far too hot, and instead chose to lean against the low stone wall that overlooks the ocean. Hopping up to sit on it, I look down and see Neil rest her arms against the brick. From my elevated position, the way her corset pushes up her breasts is much more obvious. She clearly sees where I'm looking and pushes her arms a little closer together to push them up more, a little giggle escaping her as I look away. The clattering of metal on stone draws my attention back though, and I see Neo typing with one finger while she joyously eats her ice cream. She doesn't send a message this time though, and simply pushes it towards me. Look if you want. For some reason, the sheer audacity of it pulls a chuckle from me. There you go being forward again. It's Neo's turn to chuckle as she quickly rewrites the message. Subtlety is hard in writing. I guess that's true. I laugh. Again, the curiosity burns within me at why she doesn't talk, and following her example, I ask a cautious question. Have you always been mute? It's the first time I've seen a genuine sadness on her face, and a fear that the question may have been too personal runs through me, but it's quickly replaced by a soft smile and a shake of the head. The smile isn't quite the same though, and I already miss it. So giving her one of my own, and plunge my spoon into her ice cream like she had to mine earlier and let out a small hum as the cold hit my throat. In return, Neo takes more of mine too. However, knowing I probably shouldn't bring it up again, I push her being mute to the back of my mind. It isn't hard as it doesn't particularly bother me at all. Thankfully, her face quickly breaks into another grin. A grin that pulls one from me too. Neapolitan. I think back on the day so far while we sit below the dark sky on a cliff overlooking the ocean. It was pretty good if I say so myself. The fact that I spotted Emerald in the store had definitely helped that. The girl had been stuck in my head since our meeting, and I had visited the cafe again the day after in hopes of seeing her again, but I wasn't sure why. Of course, I knew she was beautiful, that much was obvious, but there was something intriguing about her. I finally figured it out after a day of thinking. The way she talked to that Mercury guy had made her seem like the guys I knew my brother hung out with in Vale. Like she was without a care in the world, a free spirit who was willing to just relax and live life to its fullest while taking no shit from anyone. But the focus on her work afterwards had thrown that assumption off a little. The green-haired girl certainly still seemed to have a fire to her, but it was like it was being quelled somewhat. Was it because of her ex? Or her parents? I wasn't sure, but I know that I definitely want to help her find it again. And I'm glad I did. Though most of the day she had been a little reserved, a little pushing finally got her to open up, somewhat. I had taken plenty of flirting. I danced for her at the arcade to make her stare, purposely bumped into a guy who looked to be having a bad day, and let her defend me again. I'd even flat out said I liked her looking at me. That last one seemed to have finally broke through her reservations though, and she had been a lot more open. She still blushes when I say something rather obvious, but she seems more willing to return it now. As I had dragged her around Argus on the hunt for more ice cream stores, something I'm very much liking about a new city, we continued talking, and there was a noticeable increase in Emerald's flirting. The compliments came a little more frequently, the slight touches lingered a little longer, and I quite like it. The fire returned too, and she began to lead me to other places while we hunted for more stores. First was a rooftop opposite a theater. On top had been a chair and a pair of binoculars, and we'd used them to watch part of a play through one of the windows. Though there was no sound, I did quite enjoy the dancing. It hadn't lasted long though since we only caught the tail end of the performance, so we quickly returned to our hunt for more food, but that had once again been waylaid by a clothing store. We enjoyed a few minutes there messing around with the clothes. I showed off a little as I knew that she was certainly looking, before we were ushered out. Unfortunately, we only found one more ice cream store, which was worse than the first, but ice cream was ice cream. After it began to grow dark though, we both began to grow hungry for a little more than something that would turn to liquid immediately. So as it began to darken, we hunted down a takeout and made our way to the cliffs that overlook Argus. It's where we've been sitting for the last 30 minutes, simply enjoying the peace and eating our kebabs. Gods, I haven't had one of them in months. I hear Emerald say with a happy sigh as she leans back on the grass. Thanks again. I look down at her and give a grin. It isn't the first thing I've bought her today, and I am more than happy to buy her more if it means making her smile. There'd been a hot, green crop top in the clothing store we visited that she liked and showed off plenty of cleavage, and would have looked wonderful on her, but she refused to let me buy it. I'll pay you back someday. I waved the words away, and laid down beside her to look up at the moon. Pulling out my notepad, since my scroll died what felt like hours ago, I write out a short sentence under the pale light of the nearby lamps. That mean we definitely gonna hang again? I mean, you have my number. Emerald chuckles. That I do? I muse inwardly, quite happy with myself and how I managed to get it. I'm happy that she does want to see me again though, as the day had actually been rather fun. So as I lay back, I shuffle a little closer until our shoulders are touching, the skin cold to the touch, but quickly warming. It's one of the things I dislike about Argus so far. The fact that it always grows cold is annoying, and Roman even bought us extra thick blankets to combat it. But anything beat the boring city of Vale, with its boring, colorless buildings and equally boring people. At least Argus was alive with color, and music, and dance, and fashion. Plus, even though I hate it, the cold does give me an excuse to move a little closer to the beautiful girl beside me. Even though it's not much, the warmth feels good, and I let out a content sigh. Though I have been holding her hand a lot today, mostly while dragging her to stores, I don't want to push it too far, so I settle for the light touch. Thanks for today, by the way. I hear Emerald say quietly, though it's easy to hear in the empty area. Didn't realize I needed a day off like this. I give her a questioning look. I've just been studying hard lately, is all. I smirk at her and wiggle a finger between us, too lazy to write on my notepad. A confused crease appears on her brow, as she clearly doesn't understand that I'm trying to say I'm willing to help again, so with a small sigh, I pick up my notepad from my stomach and write it out. Sorry. I shrug and stick my tongue out. A soft chuckle escapes her, and I feel her inch a little closer too. Are you always as flirty as you've been today? The question sounds mostly amused, but I sense a little undertone of genuine curiosity. In truth, I know I am. It's fun, exhilarating even sometimes. After I stopped talking, my body language became my main way of communicating, and even then it was limited to what people could understand. And when I started to develop an interest in dating, my small size had certainly been a barrier. It was hard for some to take me seriously when I could still pass for a child, so I began to dress a little more seductively to show off the assets I do have. I started being more assertive in what I was after and what I wanted. And not only did it work, I quite enjoyed it. I felt free again. I wasn't acting how people wanted me to, but how I wanted to. I was making my intentions clear rather than hiding them, and I even liked the attention. Yang was also a great wingwoman, always willing to help me when a girl just wasn't getting the message, though Melanie often scared a few off that she considered too dense to waste time on. But even still, as flirty of a person as I am, I have definitely noticed it was a little more today. It also felt a little more effortless, and a few times I caught myself doing it without realizing. So I guess with that in mind, I look at her and shake my head. So why me? She asks with a laugh. Not that I'm complaining. I chuckle at the admission and tap my chin. It's an action I've always known is cute and take great joy in doing, but after a second I point to her, and then to myself, and press two fingers together. Thought passes over her eyes for a moment, but they finally light up with realization. We're the same? I give a happy nod as a smile pulls at my lips, glad that she was able to understand. How's that? For that question, I know I will need my notepad, so I reach down and grab it. I don't often write long sentences to say what I think, but sometimes there is no other way to say something properly. A couple of minutes later, I hold it out for her to see. You know what it's like to have shit parents, and to be used by people you love. I know that feeling too. But you still seem to be kind and smart, and trying to find your way to escape and make your own life. I am too. So you remind me of myself, and am pretty great. So you're flirty with me because I remind you of yourself? Emerald asks with a slight frown. I quickly realize my mistake, and write out a new sentence. In your own way. I just like people like me. People I can connect with and understand. It still sounded a little self-centered, but it's the best I can do. Thankfully, Emerald seems to understand. Just as quick as her response, I write something else out too, and she blushes again. I still like those reactions. You say that a lot. She smiles, and I stick my tongue out at her again. What exactly about me is so beautiful? I raise an eyebrow at the question and turn my head to look at her. Resting the notepad on the floor, I point to her, then to the brightest star in the sky. Her eyes try to follow my finger, but again her brow furrows. To help her, I pick up her hand and move my head closer, looking along her arm as I put it into position. It takes another couple of seconds, but her brow finally raises, and she turns to look at me. Are you saying I shine? A slight giggle escapes me, and I tilt my hand back and forth. Picking up my notepad, I quickly write out what I mean. You stand out. I like that. Oh, in a good way I take it? I nod as Emerald's hand falls to the ground, and I feel her shiver against my shoulder slightly. It seems to be getting to that time where the temperature starts to drop, and once it does drop, it will plummet fast. So it's with a sad sigh that I begin to write my goodbye on my notepad. You stand out too. In a good way, obviously. I smirk at that, and add another sentence above the one I've just written. As I show it, a part of me is a little disappointed that the day is over. I know, tongue sticking out. But I think I should be going home. It's getting cold. All right, she responds, and I swear I can detect a little sadness in her voice too. She's the first to stand to her feet, and I gladly take the hand that she offers to me. How long will it take you to get home? Picking up my notepad as I raise to my feet, I quickly write out my reply. 40 minutes on the bus. The look of surprise on Emerald's face catches me off guard, and it quickly turns to worry as the mint-haired girl pulls out her scroll. It takes a second for it to turn on, and the battery flickers, but shows the time as being almost 10 p.m. The bus has stopped an hour ago. Who? I catch myself quickly as the sound escapes my lips. Emerald's eyes lock onto mine straight away, and I know she's heard. I push it aside though, as there are more pressing matters. Like how I'm going to get home if the buses are not running. In a little bit of a rush, I write on my notepad and hold it up a little faster than normal. Are you sure? My heart sinks as Emerald gives a firm nod, and I let my head drop. I live on the other side of the city, and it would take nearly 2 hours for me to walk home. In that time, the cold will have descended on the city in full, and, with how I'm dressed, it would likely not be a very good thing to be out in that. As I'm twiddling my thumbs on what to do, since I don't have enough cash on me for a taxi, I fiddle with a lock of my hair. But nothing comes to mind. However, just as I begin to give up hope, I feel Emerald's hand rest on my shoulder. I don't live too far. You can stop by mine if you want, she says, and pockets her scroll, which has already died again. You can charge your scroll and try to figure something out with your brother? She hesitates for a second, but quickly gives a smile. If you can't, then you can crash on my couch. I think for a moment, but I really have no other way to get home other than walking. So hesitantly, I give her a small nod. Emerald smiles gentle at me, and we slowly take off back down the path towards her house. Sorry, it's not much. Emerald's face is a little downcast as she hands me the quilt and clothes. It has been ever since we arrived at her flat, and from what I can tell, it was shame coloring her face. The apartment isn't the nicest place with its chipped paint, cracked walls, and the lack of heating, but it's clean. It's not like I care about such things though, and tried to show her that, but a part of her still seems anxious. I'd called Roman when my scroll was charged, and unfortunately, he too had no cash on him to pay for the taxi. With the nearest ATM being roughly 20 minutes from our apartment, it would hardly be wise for him to brave the cold for that long since, by the time we even got back to Emerald's, the temperature had already plummeted. But since that call that pretty much cemented me stay over, we both spent the hour relaxing and watching TV. Emerald made us a cup of tea each, and, even though I wasn't going home, I was quite happy to pass the time with idle chit-chat. However, with the apartment not having any heating, the cold was quickly encroaching, and Emerald had declared with a yawn that she was going to head to bed. I don't blame her, as I too am feeling tired, but after making sure I was fine, she disappeared, only to return a couple seconds later, wearing a pair of shorts and a loose top, with a blanket and some clothes in hand. It's the first time I've seen her without her chaps on, and my eyes become glued to her legs for a second. Long and smooth, the dark skin stretched tightly over well-toned muscle. A smirk forms on my lips as I visibly let my eyes trail up them and shake my head at her words before accepting the stuff with a smile. The t-shirt is a size too big for me, but the sweatpants are likely 2 sizes too big and missing their drawstring. The quilt looks thin and well used, but it's big so I can easily wrap myself in it. Sorry you have to sleep on the couch, Emerald says with a sigh. My mom's funny about people sleeping in her bed. Again, I shake my head and let my smirk turn into a softer smile. I really don't mind, and it would hardly be the first night I have spent on a couch. To reassure her further, I hold up a thumb too. "Kay!" she replies with a nod and looks back at the room she'd retrieved the clothes from. "Well, I'm gonna go. Feel free to wake me up if you need anything." As she steps backwards, I got her a smile and a nod of my own. "Night." I hold up my hand in a motionless wave, and Emerald disappears into her room. I'm left alone in the cold room and quickly begin to change. Unfortunately, while the white top the girl gave me is fine, the bottoms are not. The waistband is much too big, and with no drawstring, I can't tighten it. Knowing they would just be more uncomfortable to sleep in since they would be getting trapped with each slight movement, I simply decide against them since the top reaches the top of my thighs anyway, and pull the quilt around me and wait for the shivers to subside. But they don't. Even cocooned, the quilt is much thinner than I am used to, and my body refuses to get warm. To try and take my mind off of it, I think back on the day. It really was a good day, and I can't help but hope the next is just as good, but there is one thing that pushes itself to the front of my mind. My slip-up. It was only a minor sound, not even a proper word, but it was still something that even Roman hadn't heard in years. Not since before high school, as that was when I had become mute. It wasn't really a major shift. One day I just stopped talking. It just got to the point where I had no motivation to talk. Little stresses and pressure from multiple sources made it to where I just didn't even want to talk. My parents always told me to shut up when I tried to ask them to stop fighting. There was nothing to be excited about at school, or really anyone to express myself to. So what better way to isolate myself from all the bad being tossed at me than just not talking? In high school, I just became the girl that didn't talk. Teachers stopped calling on me, choosing instead to talk to me one-on-one, until I started using a notepad, that is, then they didn't talk to me at all. Students mocked me, not that I really cared about them anyway. The school counselor called me into her office a lot in my last year though, supposedly concerned about my well-being. As if no one but Roman truly cared. He was my next-door neighbor back then, not my roommate, but he's always been my brother. We both came from families that had no issues with money, but plenty of issues with being together in the same room. Both of our parents would fight constantly, only really still together for the kids, so that we didn't have to live in two different houses, like that ever did any good. All it did was make me curl up in my room and wish they were as quiet as I had become. That combined with everything else, from failure to meet deadlines and stresses of making good grades, and the subtle bullying of social media, gradually made me just stop talking altogether, drop social media, and run away with Roman. Barely even a minute after I turned 18. Literally. Shortly after running from home, we ended up on Patch, and I finished my final months at Signal High. That was where I met Yang and Melanie, but even as fun as they were, they had their own lives that were so different from mine, and became only that. Mindless fun. After graduation, I somehow got into Beacon for a few months, even learned VSL, Veil Sign Language, and a few other things to get jobs, and even keep them. But then it happened. Our parents finally came looking for us with the police in tow. Due to Roman being 5 years older than me, and our sudden departure at the same time, the authorities had been concerned that something else had been going on. That it had been for years. Idiots! Was it so hard to believe that me and Roman simply understood and cared for each other without it being that? Nonetheless, once we'd straightened it out, we left again. And this time we left Vale altogether, deciding to go somewhere our parents wouldn't ever bother us again. Argus was that place. Is that place. My parents always hated it, hated Atlas in general, and Romans hated Mistral. What better place for us to settle down than a place where the two kingdoms work hand in hand? That neither of our parents would ever visit? It certainly has its flaws, but the people seem more alive, and the weeks had probably been the happiest I've had in some time. That happiness led to me finally exploring the city little by little, and finally led me to the cafe where I met Emerald. It's only been a little less than a day, but I like her. She's like me, and Roman, but different from Roman in one key detail. She's hot too. Not that Roman isn't, just not my type. But just like Roman, she understands. She gets what it's like, and I really like that. But do I like it enough to ask what I want? To join her. It's been 40 minutes, and I finally have to accept that the quilt just isn't thick enough. Though my body has warmed a little, the occasional shiver still keeps running through me. and my toes are freezing, even with my socks on. I know that if I stay like this, I'm not going to get any sleep. It's almost another 10 minutes of deliberation, but I finally decide that it's the only way to get some actual rest. Emerald Sustrai. A gentle knock on the door rouses me from my dozing. I wasn't fully asleep, but somewhere in between. It's enough to make me wonder who's knocking at first, since my mom never really bothers to check on me, but I quickly remember that Neo is having to spend the night. I had been a little on edge with her around, as I know my flat isn't exactly the nicest place in Argus. Hell, half the plug sockets don't even work anymore, and extension leads run throughout the house. But I try my best to keep it clean. With mom always at work, or at one of her boyfriend's houses, and all my coursework, it's tough to manage everything alone, especially when the place is practically falling apart, but I do my best. And hey, it's a roof over my head at the very least. Neo didn't seem to mind though. I noticed her eyes glance over the chipped paint a few times, but for the most part, she seemed perfectly comfortable. We'd simply relaxed for an hour and watched a stupid soap opera on TV, not like there was much choice since I don't have cable, but it was nice, just hanging out with someone again. Wiping my eyes of the sleep, I sit up in my bed and turn towards the door, flicking on the bedside lamp to actually see her. Come in! The door creaks open on the rusty hinges, and in the faint, flickering light, I see Neo. She's stood with a quilt wrapped around her, and I immediately feel a little bad from how she's visibly shaking. I know it's not the thickest blanket ever. In fact, it's rather thin, since it usually just lays on top of the one I am currently using. Everything okay? I ask, and she shifts a little. Her eyes close a little after a second, and one hand wiggles out of the quilt to point at my bed. I immediately understand. Oh! The fact that she wants to join me makes me blush, but the rational part of my brain knows it's likely only because the front room is too cold, and that the thin blanket doesn't really help much. But still I'm hesitant. It's not that I'm against sharing a bed with her, but the fact that it's only been a day is a little concerning. Does she want? No. She's just cold. Would I? No. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed, but she's just cold. That's all. So putting those thoughts aside, I give a small nod. A grateful smile pulls at the girl's lips as she shuts the door and walks her way over. When she reaches my bed, she slips the quilt from around herself to begin throwing it over the other, and I see what she's wearing. Though the white top I gave her covers the top half and hangs just over the top of her thighs, the jogging bottoms don't cover her legs. I knew it might be a stretch since they looked a little too big and the drawstring was gone, but I didn't really have anything else to give her. The earlier questions raced through my mind again as I realized what that means. However, before those thoughts can occupy me for too long, Neo slips into the bed, the mattress immediately beginning to shake from her shivering. Once she is settled, I turn the lamp back off and lay back down. To my surprise, she presses up against me the second my head hits the pillow, causing a shiver to run through me too at how cold she feels. It certainly takes some time to get used to nights in Argus, so it doesn't surprise me. In a moment of bravery, after minutes of deliberation, I slowly wrap an arm around her waist and pull her in a little closer to share my body heat. My mind races at first, especially as I feel her hands moving against my stomach. It's not her fingers, just the scraping of her knuckles as she warms her digits, but the feeling is there nonetheless. Though I would challenge anyone not to get thoughts when they have a girl this beautiful in their arms. Still, from how little she has moved, it's clear she isn't intending for anything more than just the warmth, so I relax a little and finally close my eyes. It's almost a minute before the fidgeting stops, as does the shivering. From what I can feel, her body finally feels warm, and the heat beneath the blankets is making things quite cozy. I know I could let her go now, and she would be fine, but I really don't want to. I'm comfortable, and the feeling of having someone in my arms again is nice. Thankfully, Neo makes no attempt to leave. Instead, she moves a little closer, her head coming to a rest against my chest, just below my chin. She's almost entirely below the blanket now, and I fully embrace her. Minutes pass, I'm not sure how many, but her breathing begins to slow, as does mine. With the warmth surrounding me and the soft, gentle breaths of the girl in my arms, I feel my eyes begin to drift back into blissful slumber. But in the very last seconds, as my mind switches off for the night, I hear the faintest of sounds. So faint that it barely even registers. Then!
And that's all for today. Thanks for coming by and hanging out. I hope to see you next time.